MMA is forever unpredictable, and it's why we love the sport. The highest highs and the lowest lows. Fighters can go from the top of the world to old news in an instant. With such recency bias, it's easy to forget the true greatness of these athletes and the amplitude of their accomplishments. In today's video, we're going to be looking at some of those moments and giving credit where credit's due. I'm George from Fight Game Insider, and in this video, we're going to look at 10 times MMA legends prove their greatness. Georges St-Pierre. Let's start with Canadian legend Georges St-Pierre. There are many times GSP showed his greatness in the cage, ranging from avenging his defeats against Matt Hughes and Matt Serra, to winning a savage 5-round against Carlos Condit at UFC 154. However, nothing can compare to the fighter coming back off a 4-year layoff at a higher weight class and stopping the British champion with a 3rd-round rear naked choke. This was a bonus-winning performance of the night bout, which gave GSP the strap that he would immediately abdicate. Anderson Silva. Next up, we have who many consider to be the middleweight GOAT, Anderson the Spider Silva, making one of the greatest comebacks in MMA history. Prior to UFC 117, Silva seemed untouchable, but in his 5-round fight against Chael Sonnen, he found himself dominated by the American wrestler for 4.5 rounds. Down on the scoreboards, Silva somehow managed to secure a triangle chokehold on Sonnen as the American held a dominant position on the floor of the cage. This forced the wrestler to tap, and Silva extended his winning streak to 13. With his legacy intact, Silva would go on to defeat Sonnen at UFC 148 a second time, but in a much more dominant fashion, this time eliminating the challenger with a round 2 TKO. Royce Gracie. A competitor and champion of early UFC events, Royce Gracie is a pioneer of BJJ and the entire sport of mixed martial arts. Gracie was on an 11-fight unbeaten streak until he finally came up against Kazushi Sakuraba, who had already beaten Royce's brother, Royler. This was a 90-minute battle fought under Pride rules in Japan in 2000. This fight was an intense back and forth, which saw both fighters attempt submissions and employ controversial tactics, like Royce attacking Sakuraba's injured knee, and Sakuraba using Royce's gi to take him down, whilst both fighters took knees to the groin from their opponent. Although Royce lost an intense battle, both fighters showed incredible skill and determination. And while Sakuraba would end up changing his nickname to Gracie Killer, defeating both Renzo and Ryan, Royce would achieve a decision victory over his rival 7 years later. BJ Penn. BJ the Prodigy Penn is a famous Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt who made his way up through the UFC's lightweight ranks in the early 2000s. He suffered setbacks in the form of a loss against Jens Pulver and a draw against Caol Uno in his first title attempts before moving up to welterweight and winning the title against Matt Hughes, but left the organization shortly after due to a contract dispute. After a few bouts in other promotions, he later returned and went on to become the lightweight champion, defeating Joe Stevenson, and at the time was considered one of the best fighters in the world. Jose Aldo. The year is 2014. Jose Aldo was the featherweight king and had one of the longest win streaks in MMA. After knocking out Chad Mendes in their first meeting back at UFC 142, the pair would share the cage once more in their highly anticipated UFC 179 rematch. Mendes landed a strong left hook in the first round, but Aldo regained control of the fight in an epic back-and-forth exchange. In the 3rd round, Mendes landed a massive uppercut, but Aldo responded with an uppercut of his own. Mendes made his best round in the 4th, hitting Aldo with a barrage of strikes, but couldn't finish him off. Although both fighters landed some good shots in the 5th round, Aldo ultimately came out on top, displaying his championship heart once again. Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor's rise to fame was unlike anything ever seen, finally reaching champion status when he defeated Jose Aldo with a mean left hook that could be heard around the world. But his reputation was questioned after losing to Nate Diaz at UFC 196. Although defeating him in the rematch, Conor then set his eyes on conquering the lightweight division, generating the same hype at press conferences and interviews that he's known for. When it came to the fight, Alvarez walked in with a ton of confidence, but McGregor's usual swagger was also in full abundance. McGregor's mouth would be backed up by his hands as he dominated from start to finish. Although Alvarez managed to land some of his own shots, McGregor remained in control. Alvarez tried to attack with his dart punch but failed to step off to the side, leaving him vulnerable to McGregor's left cross, which knocked him down time and time again. This was prime McGregor. Each time his opponent stepped forward with punches, McGregor would hop backwards and fire off devastating counter shots. His accuracy was incredible, and it allowed him to shut down each of Alvarez's attempts to make something happen. McGregor fought very smart as well, stalking his opponent, taunting him, shooting snap kicks into his midsection, and ensuring his back was off the fence. Winning the second belt and becoming a simultaneous two-division champion was unprecedented and never been done before. This night, Conor really cemented his place in the history books. Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes was already considered the greatest female fighter of all time, on a 12-fight winning streak, taking out the top names in the world and an active double champ. However, her streak was brought to an untimely end by the then 11-4 Juliana Pena in a shock upset loss in December 2021, who submitted the Brazilian with a rear naked choke in the second round. In the lead up to their rematch, both Pena and Nunes were head coaches on the 30th season of The Ultimate Fighter. The reality TV show captured how tense and dramatic the rivalry was on the lead up to the title fight. Nunes defeated Pena over 5 rounds using a southpaw stance from the beginning. Nunes knocked Pena down 3 times in the second round with a variety of shots. In the third and fourth rounds, Nunes used takedowns and managed to cut Pena open bad, leaving her bleeding heavily from the face. In the fifth round, Nunes continued to dominate and almost had Pena in a submission hold. Judges scored it 50-45, 50-44 and 50-43, all in Nunes' favour, and she regained her bantamweight title, becoming a double champion once again. Alexander Volkanovski. As far as rivalries go within the UFC, few are as entertaining as the Holloway-Volkanovski trilogy. After 2 closely contested bouts, the Australian featherweight champion had to remove any doubt of his greatness in a rubber match against his Hawaiian rival. Volkanovski dominated Holloway throughout the match, leaving him a bloody and bruised mess inside the T-Mobile Arena. Volkanovski used his speed, accuracy and angles to earn the W, leading to a 50-45 score by all 3 judges. Despite Holloway's trash talk, he had a lackluster performance, which throws shade on debates of him being the greatest featherweight of all time, whilst adding to Volkanovski's ever-growing resume. Since then, Volk has doubled down on his claim to pound-for-pound GOAT status by losing to Dagestani grappler Islam Makhachev in a close and controversial lightweight title fight. Demetrious Johnson. Demetrious Johnson is, hands down, the most dominant UFC flyweight of all time, and held a record of 27 wins, 3 losses and 1 draw before he moved to ONE FC. As he did in the UFC, DJ tore through his opposition with relative ease. That is, until he came across Adriano Moraes, who dropped Demetrious and finished him with a knee in the second round of the flyweight title fight. This was the first time DJ had been finished, and the KO loss was one which put the well-rounded fighter out of competition for over a year. After taking some time off, DJ got back into training and was determined to avenge his loss. In the second bout, Moraes caught DJ's kick and took him down. Johnson stayed busy on the bottom and even cut Moraes above the eye. Moraes was more aggressive in the second round, stunning Johnson with a head kick and going for the finish with punches. Johnson evaded the punches and took Moraes down, but was grounded again after some knees to the head and body. The momentum shifted in the third round as Johnson found success with his striking, catching Moraes with stinging combinations and heavy kicks to the body. Moraes fared well in the fourth round, but Johnson connected with a right hand that had Moraes Bambi-legged. Johnson followed up with a well-timed flying knee, knocking out Moraes in strangely similar fashion to what went down in the first fight, securing his victory and legend status once again. Jon Jones. No matter what happens from this point on, Jon Jones has already cemented his legacy as one of the greatest to ever do it. from becoming the youngest champion to winning 16 straight title bouts. His life outside the octagon doesn't come without some controversy, but there is simply no denying his achievements. UFC 285 saw Bones return to the octagon after a 3-year sabbatical, with questions around how he would perform at heavyweight, along with his previous outsides being closer than anticipated. The man, charged with pound-for-pound GOAT status, easily dismantled Cyril Gane with a front guillotine choke in just over 2 minutes, granting him undisputed heavyweight champion title, answering any questions, and making it clear to the world just how good he really is. In this moment, Jones, like many other fighters before him, used his exceptional skills, strategy, and toughness to prove their greatness. Aljamain Sterling. Leading up to his title shot, Aljamain sat as the clear #1 contender with fans, citing him to be the next bantamweight great, following its dominant run to the top. However, come March 6, 2021, when he stepped into the octagon against the current champ, Petr Yan, things weren't going his way. Losing decisively on the scorecards, it seemed Yan was on his way to a solid win, until he landed the illegal knee that would ultimately cost him the fight. Being the first person ever to win a UFC championship via disqualification, Sterling was trolled endlessly for months on end. Eager to prove the doubters wrong, the rematch looked very different, with Sterling edging a split decision victory thanks to his lengthy ground control time. Despite this, there were still critics saying he lost. Next up, he'd face former bantamweight champ TJ Dillashaw in hope to cement himself as the clear champ and mark the Funkmaster era as truly underway. And although finishing TJ in the second round, it was clear TJ was compromised from the start after popping his shoulder out in the first round, still leaving doubt in people's minds. It wasn't until May 2023 when he'd faced former double champ and Olympic gold medalist Henry Cejudo in a 5-round battle which saw Aljamain take the victory that fans would truly recognize his greatness. He now holds the second most title wins in bantamweight history and is slowly but surely entering himself into the bantamweight GOAT conversation. And that just about wraps it up for now. Let us know in the comments section what fights you think deserve to be on this list. Thanks for sticking around, and till next time, see ya!